Welcome to this Dutch in Dutch room matching video. The sound quality of your audio system is determined primarily by the quality of your loudspeakers and the way they interact with the acoustics of your room. You can take a conventional good loudspeaker and put it in a room, and you can actually end up with bad sound. That can happen if the interaction between the loudspeaker and the room is not very favorable. Dutch in Dutch loudspeakers are designed to interact with the room in a very favorable manner. So you can put a pair of Dutch in Dutch 8Cs in a big living room, in a smaller room in your home, or in a studio like this one. And in each of those situations, you'll get good sound. In this video, I will explain how to set up the room matching, how to do measurements with RoomEQ Wizard to ensure that you get the best performance out of your 8Cs. What are we going to do? We're going to start in the Ascend app, where we're going to make a room matching profile. Then we're going to go over to RoomEQ Wizard, and we're going to do frequency response measurements of the left and the right speaker. Then we're going to go into the EQ menu, where we are going to design the filters. Then we're going to send the filters to the loudspeakers, and then we're done. We'll be covering two different versions of the measurement procedure. First, we're going to do the easy and quick one. Then we're going to do a more elaborate one. The easy one is good for people who don't have any experience with doing room measurements, or for people who just want to get going and listen to their speakers. The more elaborate one is better for people who want to get the most out of their 8Cs, and preferably you have some experience with doing measurements and room equalization. What do we need? A computer, a pair of Dutch in Dutch 8C monitors with firmware version 2.4 or newer, RoomEQ Wizard version 5.31.3 or newer, a USB measurement microphone. We recommend you use the Mini DSP UMIC 1 or the Dayton UMM6, or a passive measurement microphone with an audio interface. Before we get started, make sure the 8Cs are turned on and connected to the local area network. Make sure your computer is connected to the same LAN. Connect the UMIC 1 microphone to a USB port on your computer. Let's start RoomEQ Wizard. We have to check some preferences. First, we want to make sure that we're using the correct microphone. So here you can see it's the UMIC 1 microphone. Next, we go to the Analysis tab. Here, we make sure that the default width of the window is 125 milliseconds on the left and 500 milliseconds on the right. And we want to be using 1/24 octave smoothing. Then we go on to the tab Equalizer. Make sure that the Dutch in Dutch equalizer is selected and model is 8C. Next, go on to the target type. The Dutch in Dutch 8C is a full range loudspeaker. Make sure that full range loudspeaker is selected. The low frequency slope is 24 dB per octave, and the low frequency cutoff for the target is 10 Hz. The default room curve settings are start at 200 Hz and at 20 Hz, and the slope is between 1 and 2 dB. Let's go for 1.5 in this case. It's a good average. That's it. We're going to start with version 1 of the RoomEQ process. This is the quick and easy version. Step 1 is setting up the room matching profiles. We're going to do that in the Ascend app. We're in the home screen of the Ascend app. We're going to make two room matching profiles. We're going to make one with only the boundaries, and then we're going to make a profile with boundaries plus EQ. We go there by clicking on the cog icon in the right top corner of the screen. All right, now we're going to go down, and here we find room matching profile. I'm going to click on it, and here we see that there's only a default room matching profile currently. We're going to add a profile. This is a new profile. Click on it. I'm going to call it boundaries, because this one will only have the boundary settings. This is the one, boundaries. Now I'm going to select it, apply it, I'm going to select it again, and now we're going to change the settings here by clicking on the clock icon. Here it says under boundary, it says boundaries are not set. All boundary settings are currently to freestanding mode. That means that the HC currently thinks that it is completely freestanding in open space. In this room, the HCs are close to the front wall, so we measured the distance, and that is 20 centimeters. So we're going to turn freestanding mode off, type in 20 centimeters here, and hit apply. We're going to do the same for the other HC, which is also 20 centimeters away from the front wall. We're going to hit apply. We're not going to use the sidewall settings, and that's because these don't add anything when we do the RoomEQ wizard optimization. We're going to go back to the RoomMatching main view, and we're now going to copy the boundaries profile. You can do that by hitting copy existing profile. Now I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it boundaries plus EQ. I'm going to save it. So now we have two different profiles. One is boundaries, the other is boundaries plus EQ. Currently they both have the exact same settings. That's because the boundaries plus EQ profile is merely a copy of the boundaries profile. We're going to select this profile now and apply it. And now we're going to head over to RoomEQ Wizard to actually make these EQ filters. Before we can start the measurement process, we of course have to set up the microphone. I'm going to move the chair out of the way, and I have a measurement microphone here on the microphone stand, and I'm going to put the microphone exactly in the position where normally your head would be, like this. Now we're going to go into the measurement window by clicking measure in the left top corner, and we want to check some settings. We like to add a number to each of the measurements, and we want the measurements to be numbered starting at 1 and increments of 1. The level is currently set to -12. I usually work at -10 dB. That is equivalent to 80 decibels 1 meter from the HC. Here on the right, we're going to use playback from the HC directly. That means that RoomEQ Wizard interfaces directly with the HCs and triggers the playback of a sweep, the measurement signal, from the HCs themselves rather than us using an audio interface. Right now we're going to go with single measurement mode. Make sure that the right room and profile are selected. So we're going to adjust the settings of boundaries plus EQ so that's correct. And we are going to start with the left HC. When I hit start, what you'll hear is a short high frequency sweep on the left speaker. This is a timing signal, followed by a longer sweep, a full range sweep. That is the actual measurement sweep. And after that it is followed by another high frequency sweep that marks the end of the sequence. So now we're going to hit start and we're going to back away. Alright, that's a nice looking curve, but we would like to zoom in a little bit. We can do that with the limits button here on the right. Alright. Yeah, that looks nice. So we want to get a bit of resolution, because if we're zoomed out too much, it looks very flat, but we want to get all the information. Alright, now we're going to measure the right speaker. Click measure again. And now we're going to select the right HC as a playback source and hit start again. So this is the response of the right speaker. Now we're going to the All SPL tab. We're in the SPL and Phase tab right now. We're going to switch to the All SPL tab. So here we have the two curves of the left and the right loudspeaker. Now first I'm going to click on the measurement of the left loudspeaker, and now we're going to the EQ functionality of RoomEQ Wizard. And you can find it here in the top of the screen. So here we see the measurement curve, the predicted curve of the measurement plus the EQs. Currently there are no EQs yet, so these two curves overlap, and here we see the target. I don't usually look at the filters or the filters and target. It just makes the view very messy. Here on the top on the right, we see that the current equalizer is the Dutch and Dutch 8C. We already selected the Dutch and Dutch 8C as the default equalizer. Now we're going to go into the target settings. The target level is currently at about 70 dB. Here it says 70. And there's a bit of a room curve, which we want. So we want the curve to match with the actual measurement, and RoomEQ Wizard has a very neat feature for that. Here it says calculate target from response. Hit it, and here it snaps up to the level of the mids and the highs of the 8C. What we see now is that below about 400 Hertz, there's some bit of excess energy in the frequency response with some modes, and here's a lift, and that is the result of the desk reflection that we have here in the studio. We're going to correct all these irregularities. Make sure that the room curve is turned on. This makes the sound a little bit more full, a little bit more body. The default settings here are, it starts at 200 Hertz. You can see that here in the graph. And the low frequency rise ends at 20 Hertz. So here you see it taper off. The low frequency rise slope is 1.5 dB. Before we proceed, we're going to right click here on target settings, and we're going to copy the target settings. We do this because we're now equalizing the left loudspeaker first, and then afterwards we're going to do the right speaker, but we want to use the exact same target settings for both speakers, so keep that in mind. Filter tasks. Right here we're going to use the match range of 10 Hertz up to 400 Hertz. That's because this is the region where we have the biggest deviations from the target. Individual boost. We don't want to do a lot of boosting, so we're going to reduce this to 3 decibels. And the overall maximum boost is also 3 decibels. We want the flatness target to be 1. So that's the flattest target. We want the response to be as smooth as possible, and that's why we use a strict target. All right. Now all the specifications for the filters are set, and we can proceed to match the response to the target. When I click this button, RoomEQ Wizard will do its magic, and it will design the filters to correct the frequency response curve. Here we go. Magic. The next step is to send the filters to the room profile. When I click it, a new window pops up. This is the correct profile, the boundaries plus EQ. This is the loudspeaker that we measured, that's the left 8C. And now I simply hit OK, and the filters are automatically sent to the left 8C. Now we can close this window, and we'll go to the right 8C. Now again, we're going to click EQ here on the top, and we're going to repeat part of the process for the right 8C. We don't have to do all the steps because we simply click on target settings, right click, and paste the target settings. So now we're using the exact same target for the right speaker as we did for the left speaker. We're going to leave these settings the same as well, and we're just going to hit match response to target for some more magic. And now we see that the curve becomes very flat in this frequency range. Again, send filters to room profile, right 8C, OK, and that's that. So now we have programmed the EQ filters into the left and the right 8C. But let's check it, just to be sure. So here in the bottom of the screen, we can click on the RoomMatching profile. This is the one. Now this one should have the filters. Let's see. Filters in the left, filters in the right. So yes, that works. Here you can see that these are RoomEQ Wizard filters and not just manual filters. And now we can play some music. Now we're going to do version 2 of the measurements. So this is going to be the more elaborate version. But first, we're going to delete the profiles that we just made. We will not be using those anymore. And we'll do that here. First, I'm going to select the defaults because you cannot remove a profile that is currently selected. Now we can delete them. Delete profile, hold to confirm. So we only leave the boundaries profile, and we're going to copy it again. And we're going to call it boundaries plus EQ. And for now, it will have the exact same settings as the boundaries profile. Now we're going to select the boundaries plus EQ profile, because this is the one we'll be editing in RoomEQ Wizard. Now I'm going to switch to RoomEQ Wizard. We still have the old measurements here. We're going to get rid of these, remove all, yes. Now we're going to go to measure. All right, what we see here is that the next measurement will appear as right 3. That's because we have already done 2 measurements and this will be the third. So we want to restart the numbering. So start with 1. And also we're going to switch from the right speaker to the left speaker. We're going to start measuring the left speaker. Now, the more elaborate version of the measurements is more elaborate in several different ways. One of which is the number of microphone positions and measurements that we're going to do. So in the basic version, what we did is we put the microphone exactly in the listening position. We measured the left and we measured the right, and that was that. Very simple, very easy, but there is a better way. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do 11 measurements of the left speaker, 11 measurements of the right speaker, and both of those will be separately averaged. So we'll take an average of all those measurements, and based on that average, we're going to do the equalization. There are 2 main benefits of doing the spatial average. If we have only one microphone location, we can have very localized effects in the frequency response. If we do multiple measurements, those very localized issues, they disappear because they get averaged out. A second advantage of doing more measurement locations is that usually when you're listening to your stereo system or when you work in a studio, you don't put your head in a vice. You actually move around a little bit when you have to use some of the gear, or even sometimes you lean a little bit backwards, sometimes you lean in a little bit. So what you really want is to have great sound in an area around the middle position of your head. So for these reasons, what we're going to do is 11 measurements. Let me show you. I'm going to move the chair back a little bit again. And here's the microphone. So in the basic version, the quick version, I used a microphone stand. Right now, I'll be holding a microphone in my hand. We'll be doing a number of measurements, and it isn't actually very critical to get the microphone exactly in the same position each time. The main thing is what we need to do is we have to do multiple measurements. And it doesn't really matter where exactly the microphone is. What matters is that we get a good average of the area that we want to measure in. So the top view of these 9 measurement positions is basically a square. And the distance between each measurement position is, we start in the left in the front, and then we move 30 centimeters to the right, another 30 to the right, then 30 centimeters to the left of my left ear, approximately. Then I step aside and I do a measurement in the location where my head would normally be, then 30 centimeters to the right, and then again, from here, 30 centimeters to the middle, and 30 centimeters to the right position. When we're ready with that, when we're done with that, we're going to measure on top of where your head would normally be, and another measurement just a little bit below, 20, 30 centimeters below where your head would normally be. So that's 9 plus 2 is 11 measurements. When I did the quick and easy version of the measurement procedure, I first measured the left loudspeaker and then the right loudspeaker. So that's only 2 measurements in total. Right now, we're going to be doing a lot more measurements, and RoomEQ Wizard has a very neat feature that makes it easier for us. So here you see mode, and it's currently set on a single measurement. We will be doing repeated measurements. So I'm going to click it, no repeats, clicked on this, and we'll be doing 11 measurements in total. When we hit start, you'll hear the 11 measurement signals one after the other. Every measurement cycle starts with a short timing signal, followed by the sweep, and then another timing signal. In between those measurements, you have about 2-3 seconds to move the microphone. If that is not enough, up here, you can actually add a little bit of a start delay, which gives you more time between the sweeps to move the microphone. I'm going to leave it at 0 seconds right now. All right, here we go. All right, that's 11 measurements for the left loudspeaker. We're in the all SPL overview, so here we have all 11 measurements. And here in the left bottom corner, we hit average the responses. So here on the left, we see a new curve, the RMS average of all these measurements. Now, we're going to go here in the bottom, where we have all the different curves we can select or deselect. We're going to hit the right mouse curve and we're going to clear the selection, so deselect all. Now we're going to measure the right HC. Now first we have to look at this, so the measurement will appear as left 12, so we have to restart the numbering. We do this by clicking one here, and we want to measure the right loudspeaker. We do that here. So speaker left, we're going to instead select the right HC. Now we're ready for another 11 measurements. Here we go. So what we're going to do now is, again, we're going to average the responses. Only the measurements of the right HC are active right now, they're in view, so only these measurements will be included in the average. So what we have here now on the left is an average of the left HC, this one, and we have an average of the right HC. And it's these two averages that we'll be using to do the room EQ. I'm first going to design the filters for the left HC. Therefore, we select the left RMS average. We go to the EQ menu, and here on the left we see the frequency response graph. This is the average, the green curve, and the blue curve is the target. I like to look at only the RMS average, the predicted curve, which is the measurement curve plus the effect of all the EQs. Currently there are no EQs active, so It overlaps with the RMS average curve, the measure curve, and here we see the target. The default equalizer is the Dutch HC, so we can leave that as it is. And here's the target settings. We see here that the blue curve, this is the target, is below the measure curve or the average curve of the measurements. So we want to bring the level up. We can do that by calculating the target level from the response. It's a very neat feature in RoomMatching Wizard. And this brings the target level up to what it has to be. In some situations it doesn't do a great job, so it's smart to keep in mind to have a look at the target curve and see if it makes sense. What we want to achieve is that the target basically overlaps with the mid frequencies and then gradually hands off to the base. So something like this would be bad, and here the target would be too low. So this region here is a good range to match it to. And in this situation, RoomMatching Wizard does a good job. Then we go on to the room curve. Now, the room curve is an interesting thing. If you put a speaker that has a flat frequency response in an average room, what you'll see is that you can have a reasonably flat frequency response in the mid-range, but in the bass you see a bit of lift in level. And that's because rooms tend to damp the higher frequencies more than they do the lower frequencies. So you get a build-up of bass energies. We tackle that to some extent with the room EQ, so we get rid of all these peaks and this elevation in this area. But if we were to bring it down completely to a flat line, so let me turn off the room curve, then for most listeners it would sound like there's too little bass. That's because we're used to listening to music and acoustic sounds in rooms, and we're used to this build-up of bass energy in rooms. Therefore, we can add a little bit of a room curve back in. So we get rid of the peaks, we get rid of the excess energy in this region here, but we add a little bit of bass to make it sound more natural. Some listeners prefer a completely flat response, and there is also just room for subjectivity here. So right now what we see is that the room curve starts at 200 Hertz, you can see that here, and it goes down to 20 Hertz, and here it starts tapering off. Some people like to have a bit more of a lift in the bass, like this for instance. Some people like a little bit less of a lift. So right now the level at 20 Hertz is about, what is it, like 3 decibels higher or so than the rest of the target, the flat area. Let's leave it at 1.5 as a default here, and that will sound good to most listeners. What you can do is make multiple room matching profiles. For instance, make one with a rise of 1 dB, make one with a rise of 1.5 dB, one with 2 dB, maybe one completely flat. And later on, when you've made all these room matching profiles, from the app you can easily switch back and forth between the different room profiles. And that way you can figure out what sounds best to your ears in your room. Before we move on to filter tasks, we copy the settings of the target so that we can use the exact same target for the right HC. Now, filter tasks. We're going to start with the match range. So right now it starts at 10 Hertz and it goes up to 400 Hertz. It depends on several things what you want to do, how high in frequency you want the optimizer to make filters. In general, if you have a hi-fi setup, so in a home situation, you don't want to correct to too high a frequency. So if it's a large room, I recommend you let the optimizer run up to about 150 Hertz. If it's a smaller home listening environment, you can let the optimizer run a bit higher, so maybe 300 Hertz. In this studio, we have the monitors and there's a big desk in between. And we get a reflection from the monitors off the desk. And this reflection leads to this peak here in this area, between about 100 and 400 Hertz. For that reason, in this studio, we want the optimizer to run up to about 400 Hertz to make sure that this area here is also addressed. Now the filter tasks have been specified, and now we move on to matching the response to the target. here's the list with filters, and when we hit match response to target, we can see real time how RoomEQ Wizard calculates these filters. Here we go. We don't mind, that's actually good. We see that RoomEQ Wizard has used 12 filters in total to flatten the frequency response. Now what we're going to do is send these filters to the left speaker. Okay, and it's done. Now we can close this window and close this one as well. Now we're going to go to the RMS average of the measurements of the right HC. We go back to the equalization window, and here we use the same target as before. We paste it, and now we run the optimizer, match response to target. So here are all our filters. And the next step is send filters to a room profile. Now we're going to send them to the right HC, send them, okay, and we're done. Let's make sure that the filters have all been programmed in Ascend. So we go into the boundaries plus EQ, room matching profile, and let's check the settings, filters. Here we see that filters have been programmed in the left HC and in the right HC. Perfect. Time for some music. Thank you for watching this room matching video. If you would like to have a little bit more in-depth information about how to set up room matching in your room, there is a written manual on our website. Thank you and goodbye.